Ohio people with Mennonite views, and they're gonna give us some missional news. Ohio Conference Cast.
You are listening to Ohio Conference Cast, a podcast dedicated to sharing missional stories and other information about Ohio Mennonite Conference.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to Ohio Conference Cast. This is Thomas, and I have along with me a new co-host.
Hey, everybody, it's Jacob Dodson with Thomas.
And Jacob's not an unfamiliar voice. He's been on podcasts before. And we also have a return guest that we're interviewing, not your first time. So why don't you reintroduce yourself?
I'm Dick Barrett, the Conference Minister, and this is my second time on the Ohio Conference podcast, so I'm looking forward to it.
And by now, you're just like a grizzled veteran of the Ohio Conference Ministries.
Oh, yeah, I have it all figured out.
Yeah. Well, we were waiting for someone to do that, so...
We're really glad to be able to meet with you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah,
it's great to be here, and great to be to answer some of the questions that you might have.
Yeah. And we haven't had a podcast come out since, I think, ACA. Some of the things, there were reflections and things that came out of ACA, so that's a pretty long gap. I think that's all Bill's fault. He just dropped off the face of the earth.
You didn't realize how instrumental he was in the...
Yeah, I don't know if we'll go that far, but but we hope he's enjoying a sabbatical, yes. And he's not allowed to listen to this because this is church-related. So if he listens, he's in trouble. He's violating his sabbatical understandings. We've got a number of questions, but why don't you just give us a little update on Dick? You started officially January 1, so you've got 8 months on the job?
Full-time officially January 1st, so it's been, I guess we're now into the 8th month, so
yeah.
It seems like it's gone by very fast, and it's been very full, but exciting.
And a lot of things have happened in your first 8 months.
Yes, things that were not planned, and it's almost like, seems like there's been a little bit of lull since ACA, and a lot of our pastors have been on sabbatical, and so and not a lot going on conference. So it seems like we're just starting to gear up again for some of the things that are coming in the fall. And then, of course, we lost our moderator, Bob Sauter, shortly after ACA. We've spent some time looking for a new conference moderator and some other positions that we need to fill.
Yeah, I think we all were surprised and mourned Bob's loss. He did so much for conference. I mean, what people saw and what people didn't see, that was incredible. So, yeah, that's a big loss. How's leadership team doing in the wake of his...
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time discerning and asking to who might be the person to fill his shoes. And I'm pleased to announce that this will be the first for Ohio Conferences. Oh. As of last night, we have somebody that has accepted the position.
Wow. Breaking news on Ohio Conference.
That's exciting.
Yes. So,
Norm can cue up a drum roll here or something.
Yeah, so it's pleased to announce that Lynn Miller from Tedrow Mennonite Church, who's been a member of Tedrow all his life and has been involved in conference with some things as a delegate and on the stewardship ministry team, has decided to accept the position.
I think he might have been on a podcast at one point when we interviewed Tedrow's leadership about the kind of the process that they were going through because they were deciding what direction they were going to go as a church. And I think Lynn was instrumental in that. If I'm thinking of the same person.
Yes, and that's one of the things that reasons that they recommended him is the gifts that he brings, and he comes from a background of business. He started his own software company way back in 1995 by himself, and it now has 30 employees in 2 different locations. So he has that background, and just had some of the gifts that we really were looking for.
Great. So if you want to learn a little bit about Lynn, you can search the archives and find a little bit there. But I'm sure guys
will be sending things out within the next couple of days.
Great.
That's great news. Wow. Excellent. How is the progress going to replace Cliff right now?
So Cliff's decision to step back from the regional pastor and put some more time into his position at Archbald at Zion, and also to go to spiritual direction training is something he's wanted to do for quite a while, so he just felt that was time. So that's been a little bit more sudden or more recent than Bob's passing, so we're still working with that, but we have a couple of people that have expressed interest, so we ask our conference and the listeners to keep that in prayer as we move forward to trying to find the person to fill that position.
And Cliff is doing well. I know he had significant surgery of some sort.
He had heart surgery in November, and so he's doing well from that. And then he had some back issues, but his health has been doing much better.
Okay. So this wasn't necessarily health-related.
It was just more of a sense of it was that time in his life to do something different. So, in fact, this week as we speak, he's at spiritual direction training at AMBS.
Okay. So we're just going to rehire him as a conference spiritual director?
It might. With probably not as much money to work with in the budget for that.
We'll pay him less and just have him take care of all of our problems. Well, good. Cliff, if you're listening, we're grateful for the tenure that you've given us, and we know you had a lot on your plate during those years, and we appreciate what you've given us, and we plan on still seeing you around at different events.
Yes. And then the other change on the leadership team was that Verl Brubaker, who was the credentialing ministry chair, had been doing transitional work in Ohio Conference. His latest one is actually in Pennsylvania, so he had to step back from the credentialing ministry chair. And we have Vicki Yoder from Sharon in Plain City, who has agreed to be the ministry chair.
So you now have a full leadership team?
Yes. Yeah, for the first time since I came on.
Yeah, that's great. So the 5 leadership team people then, so it's been a pretty significant turnover in the last 12 months. Then,
so myself and Paula Snyder-Belusik is the assistant moderator, and she just started in April.
Yeah.
And Vicki Yoder is the credentialing ministry chair, so she just came on. And then Mel Hathaway from the Gifts Discernment and Dean Faub from the stewardship ministry, and then Lynn will be the conference moderator. So we have kind of exciting about a new team and a couple of holdovers to keep us to remind us what we're supposed to be doing.
Well, that is exciting to know you got a full team to work with now, and you can start moving forward on some things. So what is on the docket of leadership team? What are some of the things? I mean, I'm sure you've just been trying to catch up the last number of months, but now as you kind of are caught up, at least in your positions are filled, do you have things you're working towards?
So we, besides the personnel, then our primary focuses have been on leadership development. We continue to have pastoral openings in different places. There just isn't as many that are provided by the denomination as far as names. How can we develop leaders from within our own conference? And so we've been looking at some different programs. Most recently, last week was my first meeting on the board at Journey Leadership Program through AMBS. In fact, Jacob has been participating over the last year. We have come on board as one of the sponsoring conferences. We have another pastor and mentor that are going to be participating in that beginning next month. So we're kind of excited about that as well.
So let's back up. A couple of things we want to unpack that maybe the 3 of us in this room understand, but probably not everyone. A church has a pastoral transition. A pastor is leaving. They call Ohio Conference and say, hey, so-and-so is resigning. We need a pastor. And then you said, so Ohio Conference then has access to some list of ministers that you mentioned. How does that work?
As part of Mennonite Church USA, one of the things that is a benefit to us is that there's a database, a national database that has people throughout the nation that either are coming out of seminary or are feeling called to pastoral ministry, and so they fill out what's called an MLI, a Ministerial Leadership Information Form, and that gets put on, and then our regional pastors and myself have access to that database.
Okay.
But there just isn't as many people coming out of seminary that are actually looking to be pastors, and so that database has actually decreased. Cliff and Ralph say it was once about 50 people, and right now it has about 15 people.
Okay.
So
15 for all the churches across MCUSA, the whole country.
Yeah.
Okay. So when a church has an opening, there's currently a pool of 15 candidates.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's why leadership team then is looking at other channels to find pastoral leadership.
Yes.
Okay.
Almost like we're going back into our history of calling people from our congregations. And so it's our responsibility as pastors and as members of the congregations to try to discover people that might have leadership gifts.
Good. And then the Journey program is one option for that?
That's just one option, and it's mostly for people that maybe more towards the beginning of their journey into exploring whether they're feeling called to leadership, haven't gone to seminary, but it's a good starting point.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the Journey program is that they cover like 5 main areas over a 3-year period, and so somebody will learn things about biblical interpretation, Anabaptist history, and mission. what it means to minister in a church context. And so it kind of gives them some of the things you would touch on in seminary, but in a more bite-sized way that they can still be in their own home context while they're learning. And another interesting thing, just from the 1 year that we've been able to participate in it, it's fascinating to see the mix of people. There are people participating from not only different states and around our church, but also coming from other cultures that are participating. And it's a really rich mix of people. So,
all over the world, right?
All over the
There's
world.
some different countries even.
Different countries, right. It's been exciting to, at least at this point, to see this kind of unfold. And there are a lot of potential there for our conference and for the future.
So that's just one of the ways that we're looking at and trying to explore. Are there some other ways that we can try to find pastors to serve our churches?
Is there a group that Terry Shue works with and does some coaching, like leadership mentoring?
There is a program through the Mennonite Church as well, more like an initiation program for newer pastors. I'm not sure where that is right now.
MIP, is that what you're thinking
Yeah,
of?
what?
Ministry Inquiry Program? I know that's designed for college age.
This is actually designed for pastors that are just beginning.
Okay.
And it kind of walks with them through their first couple years. But I'm not sure if that is even still going.
Okay.
I feel like Matthew Peterson at Midway might be somebody who's plugged into something like that right now. I remember him talking about that. So
part of it is just finding out all the things that are going on or that we can tap into. Mm-hmm. Some of the other things that we're looking at as a leadership team is continuing to focus on where we have been, where we feel God has led us the last couple of years, especially with that Gathered and Sent initiative. And it seems like God has led us to the place of focusing on church planting, or what does it mean to, we talk about what does it mean to be missional, and it seems like the feedback that we're getting is we've spent the last 3 or 4 years talking about it, which we have had to, and we've had some good speakers come in, but how do we take it to the next level of doing action with it?
Yeah.
And how does that tie into the initiative that we've had with the missional discipleship groups that many of the churches are participating in? So we're continuing to look at that, and specifically with both of the initiatives, the missional discipleship initiative and the church planting through the Sent Network are sponsored by Mennonite Mission Network. And so that we have had several pastors that have expressed an interest in being part of the Sent Network, which starts next month, and their primary focus is over the next 9 months is helping them to explore how we might be able to plant some churches throughout Ohio Conference.
So Mission Network has co-opted our little phrase of sent. I thought we came up with that. Like no one else can be sent, right?
We did not copyright it.
Yeah,
alas.
Yeah.
How much we could have made off that.
Yeah. So so they've taken our phrase, and it's interesting and exciting to see that we're kind of working with them to see what might be the next steps of how we can explore planting churches throughout the conference.
It's interesting because also maybe about a year and a half ago when Jessica Schrock-Reyenberg was still here, she had this hope that our conference would develop some type of network of missionally minded people. And I believe that Carla Minter from Mennonite Mission Network has sent out some email invitations for participants to start signing up for the network. And I don't think that there's any prerequisite. I think that any interested party in our conference can sign up.
Yes, anybody might have an interest in it. And that actually starts August 29th, so it's coming.
Well, I think the dedeline is already passed to sign up for that.
But I think there's some grace there, if we can get this out fast.
Yes,
right.
Yes, let's publish this.
Yes.
Good. So I remember there's the Gathered and the Sent, and it seemed like the Gathered team never really kind of formed together. We not for any specific reason. I know Myron was there, and then he resigned to his job as pastor at Berlin Mennonite. And so, where are those teams at? Are they both fully staffed and running? Or are they being worked on? Or
and I speak more for the Gathered piece, and Jacob can share a little bit more for the missional or sent piece. Mm-hmm. But we're continuing to. We have a credentialed ministers meeting scheduled for September 12th as a way of gathering. And then we're also looking at, in the fall, at our cluster meetings this year, focusing more on the Gathered piece than the sent piece of how can we get together from different churches and talk about what's going on in our different churches and maybe explore some ways that we can do things together. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that are going on in different parts of the conference, but I think we can do a better job at it.
Yeah. And is there a team, or are you just heading that up yourself?
I'm heading it up. Ralph Reinford, the regional pastor, is part of it as well, and Dan Hooley is a part of it. And so,
Dan's okay. And Jacob, we're planning on doing a whole podcast with you about the missional team. So we'll let you give a little teaser for that podcast here.
Sure. Well, in a nutshell, our work has slowed down since ACA, but we're starting to put a lot of energy now into the launch in October of a new cycle of missional discipleship groups in the conference. The other big thing, too, we're starting to plan for is the 2020 Missional Festival in Bluffton. And so there is an actual specific group in addition to our team that's doing that planning, but we are also connected with them. And you are as well, right?
And it's almost like it has a very strong missional component of it, but it's a family gathering, so it's also there's the gathered component that goes with that as well. So yeah.
So things coming our way that we need, but you mentioned for all credentialed. It's all credentialed people in Ohio Conference?
Yes. It's
Tuesday,
September 12th.
Okay, and I'm sure Judy wants to know if you're coming.
Yes.
Good. Well, glad to hear those things are being worked on.
Maybe we could hear a little bit about the feedback you've been hearing from the conference after convention this summer?
Mennonite Church USA Convention. Actually, I think Ohio Conference was very well represented from many congregations. The feedback that I have received has been mixed, a lot of positive. I had a lot of people say that they really sensed the Holy Spirit's presence in many different ways. They appreciated the worship, especially the youth and the adults being together. They appreciated the Bible study from Thomas Yoder Neufeld, his Bible study on Ephesians. There seemed to be a very good spirit present, but there was also some concerns expressed. Interestingly, it seemed to be by some of our more younger pastors that hadn't been there before, and for them, it just seemed like there was maybe a disconnect a little bit of, they weren't sure whether the denomination is where their church or where they are at theologically. To them, it was more noticeable than, and I'm not sure that's reflecting on it. I'm not, and having now dialogue with some of the other conferences and conference ministers, that I'm not sure that the Mennonite Church USA Convention represents Mennonite Church USA as a whole. That was the concerns that were expressed, but a lot of positives about the Mennonite Church USA Convention as well.
And that's just things that you've heard going around. There hasn't.
Yeah, most of it has been solicited. I asked for pastors and for feedback about what their experience was, and from their delegates at the convention.
Yeah, I can see both of those things. I was there. Jacob, you were on sabbatical. Yeah. I could understand both of those. I really appreciated the speakers, and where does Ohio Conference fit in all of this?
I heard people say that the intergenerational piece was really well done this time, integrating youth and adult.
Yes.
Was that accurate? Or?
The worship services were combined.
Services were combined.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one big decision that the delegate body voted on, was to encourage and allow delegates from age 16 and up to be a part of it. And even though they've always been, but now it's going to be encouraged. And so it seemed to be a much more youth or young adult involvement even in delegate session than we've had before. So yeah, that was good.
Exciting.
Taking a couple of months step back here, I think one of the first things that leadership team did this year was working on an identity statement. It seems like it was pretty soon after ACA. Could you circle back for those? Maybe dust that off for us. I remember you put it out, and it had. Right. It was more than a paragraph. So maybe a little bit of the rationale, the goal of that feedback you heard from it.
Well, it seemed like shortly after ACA, and I'm not sure it was because of. I think there was a couple things that played into it. One was that the Mennonite Church USA Convention was coming in July, and then there was a CLC meeting right around the same time, which is the Constituency Leadership Council that represents the different conferences of Mennonite Church USA. There was some discussion about looking at the membership guidelines. And so some of the people throughout conference that are kind of questioning where we're at as a conference versus where Mennonite Church USA is at, was asking questions about, well, where is Ohio Conference? Pretty much something that I thought needed to be done is just to kind of clarify where Ohio Conference is at, and that we have not changed over the past several years where we've been at. We still affirm the Confession of Faith and the Mennonite perspective, and we have decided to focus our attention on what does it mean to be churches in our own communities today, in the gathered and sent piece. And so I just kind of wanted to provide some clarity about where we are at as a conference.
So was anything in that document new that leadership team penned themselves, or is that all kind of pulling from where things that have been said and stated and written before?
Right. Nothing in the document was new. It was where we have said that we are as a conference over the last several years.
Okay.
I thought it was important that we at least clarify where we are today, not knowing where God is going to take us into the next couple of years. But
Good.
And I didn't get a lot of feedback from people. I'm not sure if we expected a lot, but
I see that there's a part highlighted on the document. I'm real curious. What is that part that's highlighted? Or there's several highlights.
Yeah. Well, one of them was the conference will help congregations clarify their own identities to meet the needs of their community. And that is part of the purpose of Ohio Conference. And actually that was kind of the stimulus to the entire document that we put out, because we felt, well, if we're asking congregations to clarify their own identities, we thought it was important that Ohio Conference clarifies their identity, kind of taking the lead in it.
Yes. That makes me think about the immigration resolution this year at ACA. We often don't recognize in our communities the immigrants in our midst. And I think that this whole idea of helping us know our identity, know our community, that was one example of how conference was working at that well, like helping us draw attention to, who are the immigrants in our midst and how can we hear their stories?
And we just talked about that at our ministry development team meeting yesterday. It's kind of one of those things where we passed the resolution at ACA about different steps that we're going to take to help make us more knowledgeable about the immigrants in our own communities and throughout the state and our nation. And so what are we doing to follow up on it? We want to make sure that our congregations are following up on the resolution.
As we wrap up here, Dick, any reflections you want to end with? That now that you're 8 months in and you have been through an ACA, you've been through an USA Convention, and
8 months in, I'm discovering that I still have a lot to learn, and it's a big job, but I'm just as excited about it as I was when I took over. I think we live in an interesting time. There's a lot going on in our culture, and it's changing rapidly, but I'm also excited about who God calls us to be as His church today. I'm excited about the people that we have in conference. There's a lot of people that have a lot of energy and a lot of excitement, and want to be faithful to who God calls us to be. So I'm excited about where God is leading us in the months and years that lie ahead.
Well, we want to thank all of our listeners for joining us for our time with Dick, and we hope that you will take some things away from this conversation back to your own church as we move forward together as a conference.
Ohio people with Mennonite views, and they're gonna give us some missional news. Ohio Conference Cast.
Thank you for listening to another edition of Ohio Conference Cast. We would love to hear from you. Our email is ohioconferencecast@gmail.com. Ohio Conference Cast is brought to you by the Ohio Conference Leadership Team, along with Norm Sohar, sound engineer, Megan Sohar, voiceover, Ann Lehman, publisher, and our many guests and listeners.